The Logos War Saga by William L. Weaver, Ph.D. Read by Google Gemini for Workspace. Persuader Voice. Book 1. The Great Unraveling. Chapter 5. The Fold. The informational pattern was injected. For a heart-stopping moment that stretched into an eternity, nothing happened. The two lines on the graph continued their random, chaotic dance. Jaren's heart sank, a leaden weight on his chest. A vivid image of Dr. Finch's disappointed face, a look of profound pity, flashed in his mind. It's not science, it's numerology. The words echoed in the sudden, crushing silence of his own failure. He had sacrificed everything, his reputation, his future, for a ghost in the static. It was over. Then, the impossible occurred. The two lines on the graph, representing particles separated in space, snapped into perfect, identical, and unwavering symmetry. They were no longer jittery. They were perfectly still, perfectly ordered. But the true miracle wasn't just the stability. It was what happened to the noise. The Heisenberg uncertainty that was supposed to smear the lines into a probabilistic fog didn't vanish. It coalesced. Between the two steady lines of the entangled pair, a third line appeared on the graph, shimmering into existence. It was perfectly interwoven with the other two, a golden braid of impossible physics. He was observing a stable, three-body quantum state. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow, a lifetime of study reconfiguring itself in a single, blinding instant. He was looking at a solution to a problem that had no solution. The classical three-body problem, the maddeningly chaotic and unpredictable orbits of three celestial bodies tugging on one another, had vexed mathematicians for centuries. Its quantum equivalent was a monster of such complexity that even simulating a stable outcome on a supercomputer was considered a paradigm-shifting breakthrough. Yet here it was, solved and stable, not as an artifact of calculation, but as an observed fact. It was as if the universe had always known the answer. He suddenly saw the stable dance of the three quarks that composed every proton and neutron not as a given but as a constant, miraculous solution to this very problem. He saw the three distinct generations of matter in the Standard Model not as a coincidence, but as a deliberate, repeating sentence. The rule of three wasn't a curiosity. It was a law. He saw it then, not as a physicist, but as a translator. The Standard Model of Physics, the grand cathedral of 20th century science, was a magnificent, beautiful, and incomplete structure. It was a duology, a story built on the interplay of energy and material. For 50 years, physicists had been trying to complete it by smashing things together with more and more energy, hoping to shake a new truth loose. They thought the key was a bigger hammer. Jaren saw now that they had been trying to solve a three-part equation with only two variables. The two steady lines of the entangled pair were the raw material of reality, a flat, predictable green. The precisely tuned frequencies of his device were the energy that powered the experiment, a chaotic but contained red, and the golden line, the impossible third body, was the information. A brilliant, organizing blue that was weaving the other two together into a single, coherent sentence. The noise, the uncertainty that Finch had built his career on eliminating, had condensed into a particle. It was the physical proof of his informational field theory. The quantum uncertainty was the cacophony of an orchestra tuning up, a wall of chaotic sound containing every possible note. The particle, he observed, was the conductor's downbeat, the single, coherent instruction that collapsed the chaos into a chord. It was the principle of coherent photon seeding in a laser, where a tiny pulse of pure information arrives just before the main energy pulse, tuning the uncertainty and directing the choice of every particle to create a perfect, noiseless beam of light. Just as the Higgs field gave particles mass, the informational field gave them order, meaning syntax. And he had just observed its carrier particle. In his mind, a name for it bloomed, simple and perfect, a word born of pure understanding. It was the fundamental particle of syntax. A synton. This was more than solving the paradox of Schrödinger's cat. It was hearing the two dissonant competing notes of alive and dead, and the resolving chord that chose one, all while seeing the musical score that made that specific resolution the only possible outcome. He had spoken, and the universe had listened. Jaren stared, his mind refusing to accept what the data clearly showed. The blood drained from his face, and the steady hum of the annex faded into a dull roar in his ears. This couldn't be real. It was an artifact. A sensor glitch. A software bug. A cosmic ray hitting the detector at the exact right microsecond. A cascade of desperate, rational denials flooded his mind, a scientist's last defense against the impossible. Before he could accept that he had changed the world, He had to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that he hadn't just fooled himself. He ran every diagnostic he could think of. He checked the power supply, the sensor readings, the integrity of the code. Everything was normal. The result was real. The feeling that washed over him was not triumph, but a deep, soul-shaking terror. As a physicist, his entire worldview was built on a foundation of immutable laws. He had just proven that the foundation was sand. The laws of physics were not laws. They were suggestions. The universe was not a whirling machine. It was a living story, and its source code could be edited. The weight of that knowledge, the sheer, terrifying burden of being the only human on the planet to know this secret, crashed down upon him, extinguishing the last embers of his intellectual thrill. He leaned back in his chair, the strength draining from his limbs, his mind a perfect, silent void. The only sound in a world that had fundamentally changed was the steady, indifferent hum of Echo's systems. He was so stunned, so completely overwhelmed, that he almost missed it. In the far corner of the lab, a dusty, disconnected oscilloscope sat on a shelf, its screen dark and lifeless. For a single, impossible moment, a perfect, luminous sine wave traced its way across the screen. It wasn't a jagged bolt of lightning or a chaotic flicker. It was a single, pure note of intention in the cosmic noise, a response written in the clean, unambiguous language of mathematics. It lingered for a breath, and then vanished, leaving only a fading green ghost in its wake. It was an impossible signal from a device that had no input, no connection to the experiment. Jaren's breath caught in his throat. It was an echo, and it meant he wasn't just shouting into the void anymore. He was no longer alone. Attribution. This material was developed through a collaborative conversation between myself and Google Gemini.